The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, The Voice. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and please return to the show. And hello. Welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. I hope you enjoyed our introduction, and it's brand new, and I hope you enjoyed the program as well. Today we have R.W. Haynes, who grew up in South Georgia, a few miles west of the Okefenokee Swamp. A scholarship lured him to the frozen north, where he majored in classics at a college in St. Paul, Minnesota. He also spent 3 semesters studying great books at St. John's College. After a long and somewhat checkered career as graduate student, he ended up with an MA in literature from the University of Dallas and a doctorate in English from the University of Georgia. During his years of graduate school, he worked for a number of years in Texas in the construction trades, becoming a ceramic tile setter and making a living both residential and commercial work. As a student, he enjoyed poets from Homer to Stevens and prose writers from Xenophon to Faulkner. Shortly after completing his PhD, he accepted a position at what was then Laredo State University, now Texas A&M International University, where he is completing his 30th year. He teaches early British literature, Chaucer, and Shakespeare, as well as occasional classes in such writers as Ibsen, Conrad, Spencer, and the Texas playwright and screenwriter Horton Foote. In recent years, he has published 2 collections of poetry, with another collection and a chapbook currently in press. And this year he finished a play and novel, neither of which has yet found a publisher. Thank you so much for joining us today, R.W. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you, and I hope we have a lively discussion. My first question is, what can a poet or writer learn from the classics such as Chaucer, Shakespeare? You as yourself as a professor, I'm sure you've cultivated a lot of students' interest in that.
Well, I believe the fundamental problems of human existence have been discussed by practically an infinite number of artists within the records that we have, and no doubt were contemplated by practically all human beings in times which were not recorded. If we go to Homer, right? I still read Homer with tremendous interest and excitement and revelation. When you talk about the achievement of a poet coming out of a tradition, the poets in that Homeric tradition had a tremendous number of gifted antecedents helping them establish that tradition. And the stuff that we're looking at today, I mean, aside from technology, right, was pretty much there then. You have your, how does one maintain one's nerve in the face of danger? How does one cope with jealousy, with a sense of, say, inadequacy? How does one go to war against the things that threaten one or threaten one's loved ones? if we look at classical works such as Oedipus Rex, or such as, the dialogues of Plato, really, I mean, those issues haven't gone away, have they?
No, not at all. The same questions are with us.
Yeah.
So,
So as we look at the development of classical literature, the Romans drawing upon the Greeks, and then practically everyone else in Europe drawing upon the Romans, and then in this country, of course, our drawing so much upon British literature, the continuity of problems that literature deals with is pretty clear.
right. So, what drew you to literature originally?
I grew up in a house full of books, and my mother was a poet. My father was wanted to be a novelist. I guess he was a novelist. He just never finished his novel.
Right.
But he worked on it a long time.
Anticipatory novelist.
Yeah. So, and my parents felt that really some of the most fundamental information that humans can seek is that which really can best be found in literature.
So it just fueled your curiosity, basically, and you were around books and you're around literary minds.
Right. My father was really interested very much in history, and because right now, of course, the American Civil War is kind of very controversial, and rightly so. But when I was a child, my father, who was a great fan of various Confederate generals, took the whole family to every battlefield within driving distance, and so forth. And so we got a lot of looks at places where young men died for ideas, some of which were not very carefully considered before they were going to war.
Right.
One of my brothers was was stung by a swarm of bees which came out of a Confederate cannon at Chancellorsville.
Little irony there.
Yeah, he actually should have gotten some sort of a medal for that.
I think that's funny. It's a little ironic, and in the same sense, it sounds like it's story material.
Yeah, well, so much of life is, Dustin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very. You can even think symbolically about something like that, and work around that. That would be interesting. So, what is your unpublished play about? What subject are you covering there? What is your
All right.
general spiel there?
Yeah. I grew up in a very remote part of the South. As I said, not too far from the Okefenokee Swamp, down on the Florida line, maybe 15 miles from the Florida line. A place that used to be, it was kind of a place that individuals ran away to get away from the law and so forth. And it was the least populated county in the state of Georgia for many years, and was kind of held in disdain by much of the rest of the state. But still, it was a very instructive, place to be, and the community was so small that everyone knew practically everything about everyone else, and even though there was no great literary tradition or anything like that, there was a kind of a solidarity in the community, right? Now this is back in the days when the races were pretty much separated, right, just by the tradition of the time, and So there wasn't that much dialogue, between the white kids and our African American brothers and sisters. But nonetheless, it was a unique experience. And actually, one of my former schoolmates, I guess I could call her a schoolmate. She was well, I shouldn't say that she was less young than me, right? But a novelist named Janice Doherty has written a number of novels about that county and that area, that region.
Hmm.
So
Interesting. So you're writing about your hometown and the plays taking place there.
well, the fact is that since I grew up down in the boonies, my experience with theater was really reading plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned about Shakespeare as a text, and it was only actually after I was here in Texas and I met the playwright Horton Foote that I actually found myself backstage in places, and I found myself talking to actors and playwrights and learning something about all of the stuff that really constituted Shakespeare's life. And he was an actor as well as a playwright throughout his career. He was a businessman in the theater,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So as I was thinking of writing a play, I had a short play published in an English journal a number of years ago. And I've been fiddling around with plays, but I finally got into a full-length play and finished it. And it's really kind of a study in acting and actors, and the things that they must contend with in order to do the amazing thing that they do. And one of the great personal discoveries for me out of meeting Horton Foote and associating with his colleagues and friends was that I began to realize what an art acting is and what a mysterious art it is. And I'm still amazed and perplexed at how actors do what they do. So this play is sort of about that. It's one of those plays. It's a kind of familiar format. There are some seats across the stage, like a roast or a panel discussion or something like that. And then these actors are up there, but they're not exactly really actors. They're also sort of gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they sort of go back and forth between being divine and being petty and sort of carping. But you learn about them in the course of their conversation. And what I hoped to do was to open up the idea of the acting profession in such a way that it would reflect something of my own amazement at what actors do.
That sounds fascinating. So how long did it take you to write your novel that you've completed recently?
I started it about 3 years ago, I suppose, and it was all along. It was intended to be sort of, dominated by a comic spirit, right? And as time went by, the comic spirit became sort of interfused with something else, and I began really to see that what was happening was that I was really talking a lot about the South that I grew up in, and the academic South, which is something I know maybe all too much about, having gone to different kinds of schools, including one of the most conservative schools in the South, the University of Dallas, which is really a good school,
Mm-hmm.
but it's highly conservative. Catholic institution. And of course, while there, I was not exactly on the most popular wavelength
Right.
among those present.
Interesting. So it took about 3 years, I would say. Is that about accurate about to write the novel?
Yeah, and actually, uh, I began this last summer
Hmm.
with the firm conviction that I was one page away from finishing it, and it was actually about 5,000 more words before I got to the point at which I said, "All right, enough is enough." So it's done now.
Excellent. I wish you luck in publishing that.
Thank you. I'll need it.
Yeah, it's very hard to get works published, especially novels. I think it's easier to get a single poem published, I think, in a lot of ways, than get a full novel completed and published. Did you enjoy the Great Books program at St. John's? And I'm curious
Yes.
what impressed you about that you took interest in to go there.
My older brother, who was also the brother who sort of got me interested in writing poetry too a long time ago.
Hmm.
My older brother went to St. John's and strongly recommended that I go there. I was profited greatly, I think, by being there. I met so many people who had something to say, so many people who had just more personal resources. I mean, I think spiritually, and I'm not trying to put anybody down or anything, but intellectually, people you could talk to with great pleasure and profit, right? In a sense. And it was that was really an exciting part of it. There were some great teachers there at the time. A man named Jacob Klein was really an awesome figure on campus,
Hmm.
and there were others there who were remarkable. One of the best teachers on the St. John's campus in Annapolis didn't even have a college degree, right? So it tells you something about, there was kind of there was almost an outlaw aspect of it. It was almost like having Socrates on campus. Socrates wasn't really an academic either.
Right.
But at St. John's, in the first 3 semesters, everyone takes Greek. So
Hmm.
I took Greek for the first year, and then in the first semester of the sophomore year, I decided that I wanted to continue the study of Greek, to read Greek poetry and Greek literature, Greek philosophy. So I transferred back to a college that I had actually been at previously up in Minnesota, where I could major in Greek.
Oh, interesting. So, as far as the classics, what advice would you have for students embarking on such a journey to learn about the classics, if they were to embark on their own?
There's good news, I think, in that. One of the really difficult things about being a classics major is you have to memorize a tremendous number of paradigms, of forms, verb forms. I mean, Greek has moods that English doesn't have, you know. I mean, so so there's all this stuff that you have to memorize, and then very often, well, if you go to graduate school in classics, you're probably going to find yourself in a classroom taught by an archaeologist who's not really interested in literature so much as interested in ancient pots and things like that. So it's, if you're a literary person, you may find yourself disappointed. But the good news, as I mentioned a minute ago, the good news is that technology has made a lot of the grammatical stuff much easier. And there are lots of electronic texts of classical documents now that you can just put your mouse on a verb and it tells you, gives you the vocabulary entry, and it tells you what part of speech it is and everything else. And so
Hmm.
You don't have to go through that endless and tedious labor of memorization the way people always have had to do to learn classical languages. I mean, even the Romans would send their children to Athens to learn Greek, but it was tough for them too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this technology came along a little too late for me.
Really, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with it myself. I just find it interesting, like learning about literature, and it's fascinating to me that you mentioned that you can be taught by an archaeologist or some stranger that's not really interested in literature. Why do you think that is? Why do they have it set up that way?
Well, archaeology is interesting.
Yeah.
Archaeology is fascinating. I love archaeology, but most of the people in archaeology have chosen to deal with specialized aspects of classical studies, and they are very often not really interested in literature itself. So if you talk to many archaeologists, you want to talk about Oedipus Rex, you want to talk about Sophocles' Greek play, right? Most of them are not going to be extremely interested in it. And then not only the archaeologists, you've also got the grammarians.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to understand how much grammar you get into in classical languages, and how often in classical courses you find yourself almost at the mercy of people whose interest is almost restricted to grammatical matters.
That's interesting. So what subjects intrigue you as a poet, and what do you think poetry is ultimately the study of?
I think that poetry is, it deals with a range
Mm-hmm.
of human interests and passions and potentials, and of course, poetry includes, your couplet, your limerick, right? Your little dog collar poem of the kind that Alexander Pope used to write, and it goes all the way from that to the epic. But I think that poetry, in its best nature, is philosophical, and I think that it's good to keep in mind the meaning of that word, philosophy. Philosophy for the ancient Greeks was the love of wisdom, right? Now it kind of refers to an academic subject that to me is not particularly interesting, right? I'm not fundamentally interested in, look at the title of my book, Heidegger Looks at the Moon. Heidegger, one of these, you want to read discussions of language and how language connects to, right, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. It seemed to me that the idea of Heidegger looking at the moon gave a great visual image of a kind of a dilemma, right, that we face. I remember at one of the universities where I was employed, previous to where I am now, I remember a new philosophy hire was standing out in the hallway, and he was, I just met the guy, I liked him a lot, really nice fellow and so forth. But he was talking to a student and he says, and there's this wonderful work by a guy named Plato, and it's called The Republic. And it really clears up so many dimensions of how the state should perform, or the things the state should avoid. And the student said, "Oh, that's really interesting," and kind of making a mental note of it. And then the guy said, "Yeah, and one day I'm gonna really sit down and read it."
Wow.
And I sort of thought, well, wait a minute. You're a philosophy professor with a PhD in philosophy, and you haven't read Plato's Republic.
Wow.
Alas.
That's funny. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll return with the poetry of R.W. Haynes. So
Allah, 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 yeah. I'm crying for the sins of mine. I found a love for me, darling, just dive right in and follow my lead. I found a woman, beautiful and sweet. Oh, I never knew you were the someone bestowed on me. I was a kid when I fell in love. It was my beautiful mom, but I'll never give you up, 'cause you're mine too. Let's walk slow, your heart is all I own, and in your eyes you're holding mine.
hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and please return to the Literary Corner, Parrot TV, Literary Corner, Parrot TV, Literary Corner, Parrot TV, Literary Corner, Literary Corner. Brought to you by New York Parrots. Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our break. There's some excellent music to listen to. Today we have R.W. Haynes, and he's going to read a couple of poems for us. So go forth, sir.
All right, good. This poem is the one that gives the title to the book I have coming out from Finishing Line Press in early November. The title is Downtown Waco, Midnight, Heidegger Looks at the Moon. Let me just give you one little bit of background that when President George W. Bush was making a decision about where he was going to have his presidential library located, he had three candidates in mind. One of them was Baylor University in Waco. Another was actually the University of Dallas. Another was SMU, and he ended up locating it at SMU. So anyway, all right. Downtown Waco, midnight, Heidegger looks at the moon. The Bush Library really should be here. For each dead city needs a laugh or two. A little something so the skeletons can jeer on nights like this, when there's little to do and nothing to haunt but the haunting lack of hope, where words are born to sputter anxiously toward brief life in some half-bungled trope, irrecoverable etymologically. Is there another cyclone on its way to remix this desperation here, to make words and deeds mutually obey a dim correspondence, never more clear than the misshapen moon cruising so high over the Brazos in the hopeless Waco sky.
Captivating. That's interesting. I like the background story for that. And I love the skeleton image. That's quite interesting. The jeering skeletons. Let's hear your next poem. That was excellent. Look forward to your next one.
Okay. This poem is titled Lost Grave, Buzzard's Roost Cemetery, Goliad County. And that's a real place, by the way. And there is an epigraph under the title, which reads, "For Eliza Holiday Horton." Eliza Holiday Horton was the great-great-grandmother of the Texas playwright, screenwriter Horton Foote. Her father was a militia general in the War of 1812, and her husband was the first elected lieutenant governor of Texas, a man named Albert C. Horton, who just barely escaped with his life from the massacre in 1836 at Goliad.
Mm-hmm.
And Eliza is buried in this cemetery, and no one knows which grave is hers. Her husband was one of the major slave owners. He had two big Texas plantations before the Civil War. Lost everything, of course, when the North won the war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We don't ask too much from friendship, my friend, or kinship either. For these abandoned graves have joined together with those of your slaves, lost, found, a temporary end to labor and trouble. Let's rest beneath these skies, our monuments, murmurs of kind consolation, our hopes gone to seed, disintegration, putting things ready for a bright sunrise. No more massacres, except where bees massacre indolence, loud happy birds slaughter the silence with rude squawked words among lost graves now hidden by trees. Are you there, Eliza? We've come a long way from old Alabama, wouldn't you say?
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. It seems like a lot of your poems deal with place and history.
Yeah. Well, it's when your mind is full of something, that's what goes into your output, I guess. Right.
Right. Of course. I mean, and if you kind of have this obsessive mind that just encourages your mind, just kind of compels you to study a subject and just think on it a lot. It translates into your poetry. I think it happens to me quite a bit with different things. So, speaking of that, what subjects intrigue you most as a poet?
What poetic subjects?
Yeah, like what do you write about the most, do you think?
Well, as I said earlier, I think poetry is philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that poetry helps us move toward wisdom. This is one of the reasons that in every class I teach, I pronounce all of my students poets in the first week. And I tell them, you're all poets. You're officially poets now. Go home and write some poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't have to tell them what to write about,
Right.
It's the heart that sort of tells us what to write about. The heart, the mind, the spirit, love, disappointment, you know, the things we can't get away from, right? You know, they push us up against the muses.
Mhm.
So there we are.
Right.
And, so in the larger scheme of things, you know, this is one of the reasons that I'm really interested in writing prose fiction now and writing plays, because my instinct really as a poet seems to be to write sonnets, and I keep writing sonnets despite myself. And so I selected some of the ones this time that, you know, to try not to just do sonnets, because the sonnets concentrate so much in such a short space. That's one of the fascinations of sonnet writing for me, right? Is trying to be cosmic in 14 lines is a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to be able to talk about some of the larger issues, including some of the things that have flared up in our national politics, right?
Right.
In recent years. There's been so much demonization of people we disagree with,
Mm-hmm.
and it has become so destructive.
Right.
And of course, some of the folks I know are very, very outraged by I guess you could say, the radical conservatism of many leading figures today. But my God, when I grew up in the state of Georgia, you know, the black kids couldn't go to the state university, right?
Right.
A man named Lester Maddox got elected governor of the state of Georgia because he took a box of pick handles into his restaurant for white people to pick up in case any black people tried to come in to have dinner, right?
Wow.
I grew up in that world, and it was worse than it is today. I mean,
Right.
You know, I'm not saying it's paradise today. I mean, some of the headlines now make you want to vomit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that if our literature doesn't engage with certain fundamental predicaments, right, then I think maybe some opportunities are being missed.
Right. Absolutely. It's intended. I mean, you're contending with the world with meaning, as you mentioned, the study of wisdom, the love of wisdom, and literature. That's where you find people basically wrestling with ideas, wrestling with human personalities, with events, with just everything. You know, just trying to sort things out. Really, I think.
Yeah, we have to sort of, you know, and of course, as I suppose any artist is going to have to consider the issue of, you know, of egoism, egotism, right? And it's sort of like, if we're just in this to leave everybody else in the dust, are we doing justice to ourselves or to anyone else? So we had there was a woman who was a poet at the University of Georgia while I was there. There were two people when I first started graduate school at the University of Georgia. There were two faculty members that you could count on meeting your eyes in the hallway. Two out of a big faculty, a large department, and other people too. And most of the faculty would not look you in the eye, but there were two who would. And one of them was a man named Marion Montgomery, who was a poet. And the other one was a woman named Judith Ortiz Cofer, who was a nobody back then, but who became a famous poet and fiction writer later, before her lamentable early death a few years back. I think that was inspiring to me. It was inspiring to me that it was the poets who were open, right, to looking at the graduate students as though they were human beings. And I hope we're all doing that.
Absolutely. I think that's a goal, and it's very hard sometimes with the world falling apart as it is right now to consider just yourself, and what your predicament is. So thank you so much for joining us today, RW. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Yes, it's been an excellent afternoon of conversation. And what would you finally say to the viewers out there? If you had anything to say, what would your final words be?
Write a poem tonight.
Write a poem tonight. Excellent. Couldn't get everyone better advice. Just keep writing, keep reading, keep doing what you do, and definitely appreciate your time, RW. It's been wonderful. Heidegger Looks at the Moon. I believe that's your book at Finishing Line Press. So take a look at that. It sounds fascinating. This is Dustin Pickering, and I appreciate every viewer out there today watching the wonderful programming we have. And if you would like to join us on the program, just take a look down at the bottom of the banner, Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. Send a headshot and a brief paragraph bio, and we'll be in touch. And I'll give you a good time and date. Just let me know if you have any preferences. And thanks so much, everybody out there, the viewers. We're looking for 1 million subscribers to our YouTube. So get on our YouTube station and hit that subscribe button and be notified when we put up videos live and when they come up. So that's a service that we offer for you guys out there in the poetry community and the creative writing community, as well as just, creative minds in general. We're looking for 1 million subscribers. So please hit that button. And, if you want to donate a little bit of extra money, if you have a little extra money, want to donate to us, paypal.me/nyparrot. That'll go into getting some new things for us to keep our programming alive and well and operative, and as well as to improve what we do for you. So excellent afternoon with R.W. Haynes today. And this is Dustin Pickering signing off. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Dustin.
Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects, from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, NewYorkParrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and please return. The Literary Corner.